And welcome to the opening training session for the EDTA Capitol Hill week of March 22nd through 26th. I am so thrilled that you are all here. It's particularly gratifying to see so many students coming to the table this evening. You are our star advocates, athletes too, and our future. So thank you. And I'm also grateful to see my Advocacy Leadership Network folks here. And welcome to staff as well. Marianne, good to see you. And at that, I'm going to share my screen. Patience. And get us started here from the beginning. Yes, welcome to Going to the Hill, everything you need to get ready for your Capitol Hill virtual visits. So first, I want to welcome my co-conspirator for the evening, and that is Lynn Tuttle, the Director of Public Policy for the National Association for Music Education. Lynn, would you like to say hello?
Good evening and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And Jim, thanks for having me.
And I couldn't imagine doing this without you. So to begin, it is March is Arts Education Capitol Hill Month across multiple disciplines: music, dance, theater, visual arts, and media arts. So what I'm talking about in that regard is I'm talking about Arts R education. It's also, of course, by the way, Theater in Our Schools Month. It is Music in Our Schools Month. And we are so lucky to be able to converge together in honor of all of these events and disciplines at the same time. So at that, why are we doing this? Well, based on the Arts R Education Foundation that we are building upon, budget shortfalls. It's forecast that there will be $650 billion in budget shortfall across the state's budgets in the next 2 years. There is the full expectation that there will be a focus on remediation, that is learning loss as a result of the time that students have spent out of the classroom, and as they re-enter the classroom, concerns over reading and math and other subject areas that are considered core. Well, we're also concerned about learning loss in the arts, so we'll talk about that a little bit. Also, one of the factors that is a result of the pandemic is student, family, and faculty trauma. What has it meant to have been sequestered at home in front of a computer trying to learn? Students are going to be re-entering the learning environment most all in the fall. We believe that the arts should not only be part of that ecosystem, but they should be central to that ecosystem. We all know what the arts can do for students in creating safe and nurturing spaces, to make them feel like they belong, to make them feel like they can be safe in a learning environment, in a classroom, in a black box, on a theater. We think we matter. So also, if they are coming back into the classroom and they're going to be on those stages, they're going to have personal protective equipment that is unique to the performing arts classroom. I don't think I need to explain that to anybody on this call. You get it. So in the chat, I have placed 3 important links. The first is to the artseducation.org website. Not going to talk so much about that here today. I will let you explore that yourself if you haven't already. I've also put in the chat the link to all of EDTA's Capitol Hill Week tools, toolkits there. The asks are there. Everything you need to get started and get moving on making your appointments and making the asks. The last link in there is to the Arts R Education Pledge. If you haven't signed the pledge, you could do it in about 2 minutes. It's a commitment, your commitment to funding arts education in your schools in the 2021-22 year. We know that the budget process in most schools happens in the month of March. Here we are, it's ground zero. Make the pledge, and in turn, ask your schools to actually sign and rather pass the resolution committing to funding in the district schools in your area. So with that, here's the deal. What's the purpose of Theater Education Capitol Hill Week? Well, you want to share your theater education stories of the impact of theater and other arts education in your district, in your school, in your life during the pandemic. You want to communicate theater education's mission, EDTA's mission and goals, that's part of your toolkit, and legislative request, your ask. You want to increase the federal visibility or footprint of theater education. And you want to build relationship between stakeholders and key decision makers. There are 71 new legislators in the Senate and the House this year. They are, believe it or not, eager to hear from you. They need to be educated about what are the issues that matter to arts and theater education in the coming months and years. This is a critical time. It is, believe it or not, a time of opportunity. It's not only a new Congress, it's a new administration. They are deeply invested in education because they know, frankly, in 2022, there's a new election coming up. Lots of people's legislative situation may be at risk. They want to do everything they can to position themselves for 2022. So this event is important. So how are you going to get involved? Well, you're already involved. You're here, aren't you? So we know you're involved, and we are so appreciative of that. So for those of us in the Educational Theater Association, reach out to other members of your thespian chapter and create a delegation. You know, how many people can we get from Alabama, from New Jersey? And New Jersey's already ahead of the game because of Mr. Bates there. And when you do that, you create a powerful team that can spread out across the virtual capital. Maybe you have 5 or 6 people from the same district. Well, you'll have to make a decision. Who is going to actually make that visit to that particular House rep? Who is going to make the visit to 1 or 2 of your senators? You will need to coordinate. There's only so much coordination that I can do personally. I think that you can do a lot of this yourselves. You get it, you know how to do this. So you're going to set those meetings with the offices of your folks. So we're going to talk about how to do that in a few minutes. But right now, more importantly than anything else, you want to be able to share that story and ask with your members of Congress via email, a phone call, or your virtual meeting. Let's just pause there for a second. Yes, we know this is different than walking the halls of Congress and having that FaceTime meeting. But there are some potential advantages to this. You may be able to get a longer meeting in a phone call or a Zoom than you might have otherwise gotten in a really crowded little office on the Hill. Let me just say this for a second. If you get that direct meeting with your senator or House rep, way to go. I'm so happy for you. More likely, you will meet with their staff representative, someone who is charged with education or has a responsibility to address issues involved with the arts. Just as important, in some ways, you are more likely to get more time with them, and that's great because they are empowered to really listen to you. It's their job to communicate your concerns from your district and your state to their boss. So don't think that that visit isn't very important. So what do you have to do to get ready? Well, here's 5 steps, and a lot of these are spelled out in much more detail in 5 Steps to Success, your guide to creating a meeting in your toolkit. Do your homework on your legislators. And let me just talk about that. Tomorrow, those of you who have actually registered for the event will begin receiving your Senate and House sort of cheat sheets. In other words, what committees are they involved on? Are they members of, for example, the Arts or STEAM Caucus or the Senate Cultural Caucus? And also, On that sheet is going to be the individual staff member, their email and their phone number in which you want to use to create your appointments. They're the person that you want to reach out to, whether you do it by email or whether you do it by a phone call. And you're going to have a script to help you do that. You theater folks, you know what it means to get off book. You're going to be able to nail this without any effort at all. And you want to choose how you want to do that. You know, I'm not going to tell you that an email is better than a phone call. I would right now, and Lynn, you can chime into this. I would start with an email and then follow it up with phone call. What do you think, Lynn?
Yeah, absolutely. I would start with an email. They are answering phones, and the phones may be wherever the staffer is virtually. If the staffer isn't on Capitol Hill, the email is probably the most direct way and the quickest way to connect, especially because Jim will be sharing with you emails and staff contacts for more than just the scheduler, for the legislative director, for the person who holds the education or the arts portfolio, for the member of Congress that you're trying to reach out to. So having their emails is awesome, and having the way to directly connect with them, that's where I would begin.
Thanks, Lynn. So, and be persistent. Try again. Just because you don't hear from them right away doesn't mean eventually you won't land that meeting. You know, and just thinking about when we've done this in person, a lot of times, you know, it sounds great. And I will say you can start tomorrow to try to make your visits. But sometimes in some cases, you'll be most successful at the 11th hour. It's surprising. You know, I can get you in tomorrow. So don't dismiss the idea that you can make an appointment late in the process. And ideally, yes, we're targeting the week of March 22nd through 26th, but take the appointment that you can get. Be flexible. I realize for all of us, students in particular, educators, that's right. Oh, that's right. You have a job. Some of you go to school. The others of you to teach school. So get the appointment when it will work for you, you know, and try to be as flexible as you can.
And Jim,
if you get that appointment, this is the advantage I think you might have to this virtual moment. You have your packet of leave behind content that is part of on the EDTA Capitol Hill page. Ask them, can I go ahead and send you some documents now prior to our meeting? Send them on. And in fact, if you are unable to secure that meeting, if they just aren't available, send it on anyway. Send on your materials to your representatives and your senators, whether or not you get the meeting, because it still matters to them. You've provided them with important documents that will matter. So yes, this happens to have some links on it. You can go on your own independently. If you want to do some homework, you can find every senator, every House rep has a page. Be proactive, go to it. But here's the thing, we talked about this a minute ago. Are they members of the Senate Health Committee? Are they on the House Education and Workforce? Are they Education and Workforce members? These are important roles. They have the upper hand in terms of what happens in the education committees and in the legislation. So find out whether they're on those committees. The docs I send you tomorrow, in the next day or two, it will tell you what committees that they're on. So pay attention if your particular rep is on either the Senate Health Committee or the House Education and Workforce Committee, and the approach committees as well. And we already talked about the Arts Caucus and Senate Cultural Caucus. So here's your tools. 5 steps to success. Already talked about that. Check it out. It will help you a lot. The EDTA template meeting request letter, that is not yet in the toolkit. I'm hoping that it'll be in there tomorrow. And the informational sheets that I'm going to share with you tomorrow. So just to give you a taste of this, this is pulled right from that template letter. Hello, my name is so forth. This is self-explanatory. And it addresses some very specific things that are actually addressed as part of our legislative asks. Title IV, Reopen and Rebuild America's Schools Act. The template letter that is going to be embedded in the toolkit actually starts off with some specificity for those of you who are troop members. and you can customize this letter to, to address your direct troop and your district and your state. So with that, I'm going to step back here and I'm going to let Lynn take over and talk about the federal perspective about what's going on in the coming days and weeks in terms of legislation. We all know tomorrow the relief bill is likely to be passed by the House. Woohoo! I'm so happy about that. Lynn?
Thanks, Jim. And I will just share that your music education colleagues have started meetings this week and last week even. And just one other note as you work on scheduling, just like in normal times when you're scheduling to be on Capitol Hill, don't be surprised if meetings, if staff come back and ask you to switch your meeting. So just be, as Jim said earlier, I can't reiterate, be as flexible as you can, knowing what your schedule is yourself. So don't be surprised if they come back and ask for changes. All right, so where are we in March of 21? Well, as of last week, we have a new Department of Education, Department of Education Secretary, Dr. Miguel Cardona. He hails from the state of Connecticut, where he was Commissioner for Education prior to coming to the U.S. Department of Ed. And he is a huge arts education supporter. Huge arts education supporter. He's worked very closely with music and visual arts and dance and theater leaders and arts administrators in the state of Connecticut. And when he talks about arts education, he uses the language that we use in the arts. He talks about how the arts help students with their discovering their individual identities and expressing who they are and how they want to connect with their community, how the arts help us build community and build an inclusive environment in our schools, how the arts help students find their agency. And so he really sort of speaks, even though he's not an arts educator himself, he speaks about it like I've heard arts teachers talk about it, students talk about it. So that's really exciting to have him coming in as head of the Department of Ed. We're also really fortunate, I believe, to have a nominee for Deputy Ed Secretary, so the second command of the department, Ms. Cindy Martin. She is, I don't know if she's now currently or now formally, superintendent for San Diego Unified School District, an incredible supporter of the arts. I've had the opportunity to hear Cindy speak, and I've been on panels with her over the last several years. And I never walk away without bursting into tears at least once, if not more times, when she speaks about the power of the arts and how important it is for all students. So again, a very different sort of landscape in terms of arts education support at the Department of Ed. And so looking forward to what that means for us down the road. As Jim alluded to, we are hours away from stimulus relief being completed at both EDTA and NEFME. We've been advocating for additional funds of stimulus to support public schools and state and localities, now dating back almost a year, back to early May. So it's kind of nice to see that this has come to fruition. We'll talk more about what those numbers look like in a moment. We finished appropriations for FY21, FY22 will get underway now that stimulus relief is done, and that'll be part of what the asks are that you'll carry forward for this week of virtual advocacy. President Biden, of course, has come out with trying to get to reopening of schools. So we'll talk about that in terms of the Reopening Rebuilding America Schools Act, in terms of asks. So those are all sort of background pieces to think of as you think about your work in your virtual Hill meetings. So COVID relief packages, these are some of the ones that happened prior to the one that's ready to pass, right? So far there's been $68 billion allocated for K-12 education funding. And most of those funds in K-12 come through the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, otherwise known as ESSER, right? Because we are the federal government, we like our acronyms. So it's ESSER, the ESSER fund. And most of those funds are being allocated to the states based on their Title I funds, and then down to the districts based on Title I funds. Okay, so let's go ahead. The governors have a little slush fund there in terms of education too, but really the main money is sitting in the K-12 portion of the bill. So go on to the next slide, Jim, thanks. All right, so what does that new bill look like? I think we ended up just shy of the $130 billion directly for K-12. When Jim and I were talking on Sunday, it was still 130. I think it came out from the Senate side at 125. And we'll talk for a moment about just how big that amount is, because that is a lot of money coming down for schools. Additional funds for higher education, 40 billion for higher ed, and then 350 billion for states and localities to shore up their budgets. It's supposed to support frontline workers, pandemic relief, and it's also going to help backfill some of those state budget deficits that we've been forecasting and that Jim alluded to. In addition, there's $4 billion dedicated to the E-rate program, which helps address what traditionally we call the homework gap. Over the last year, someone's been calling it the learning gap, right? For the students who don't have access to the technology and to the wireless and wired infrastructure that they need to access learning in a virtual space. The E-rate program has been around for a decade and a half. So it's the main way in which funds are provided to schools, libraries, localities, community centers to make up that difference in terms of access. And again, Jim, you did such a lovely job laying this out earlier, right? That cumulative deficit that's been sitting for state and localities due to COVID-19's economic fallout. So this bill is attempting to right that a bit. And I know it seems weird to talk about state funding when we're talking about K-12 public education funding, but as probably many of you know, about 40% of most states' budgets go to fund public education. So the backfill for the states matters as much as the additional funds that will be coming down for K-12 education from the stimulus bill. And again, we'll be looking at as we think about schools reopening either this spring or into the fall, as Jim alluded to, there'll be additional costs and expenses attached to that, right? Additional procedures, additional actual materials, right? Additional tools, additional hygiene products, additional levels of cleaning and of sanitation that haven't been done before. All of those add up to additional costs to reopen those schools, let alone the additional personal protective equipment that we might need in the performing arts classroom. So just want you to think a minute about that figure, $125 billion with a B coming for K-12 public education when the bill gets signed tomorrow. That money is almost, not quite, but almost 10 times the amount that districts get currently, or that schools are eligible for currently under Title I Part A. So it's 10 times, almost 10 times the largest amount of funds that come down to public schools from the federal government. It is a huge investment on the part of the federal government. And just FYI, as you think about the conversation you're going to have with folks on Capitol Hill, schools and districts are also going to need help figuring out how to spend those dollars, and there are opportunities to support theater and arts education because of that. So just keep that in the back of your mind. It's not the advocacy you're going to do on the Hill, but it's work that you can do back at home later. We're looking at this slide's looking, you know what, I need to update this, Jim, because it says FY21 should be FY22, right? That's what we're looking at for for appropriations. That's my fault. I didn't update that for you. So we're looking at appropriations or budget, monies that get budgeted for through the normal process, so not stimulus dollars, but the normal appropriations process of the federal government dealing with education. And of course, ESSA refers to the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is the main K-12 education law from the federal government. And so we are, what you're seeing in the far right column are the amounts that were finalized in December for this current year. For FY22, and you see that sort of arts, our education column on the left, we would like to see at least $1.6 billion for Title IV Part A. That's the most flexible funding pot under ESSA. And part of those dollars are designated and set aside to fund a well-rounded education that includes theater and arts education. So it's funds that can truly come help and support in a supplemental fashion arts education funding in your school district. We put in here awaiting the president's budget. When President Biden was candidate Biden, he spoke about significantly increasing the appropriations appropriations for Title I Part A. So while we'd like to see at least what you see in FY21, since we won't get the president's budget for a few months now, since he's a new president, normally it's out by now, but that first year of the presidency, it normally comes out later. You can certainly say that you'd like to see at least the amount that we saw, $16.54 billion in FY21. And the ask for Title II Part A, which is really focused on professional development for educators, including theater and arts educators, we'd like to see the amount authorized in the law, which is that $2.29 billion amount. Jim, anything else to cover on this slide?
No, I think you've done that. I would want to add one thing you mentioned. When those stimulus dollars come down to the states, we are going to need to do a reset about our advocacy, because there will be opportunity and purpose to begin advocating at the state and district level all over again, because
Yep.
you really want to be vigilant about those dollars, because once they go to the states, it's a whole new ballgame.
Yep.
So,
Let me do this final one.
yes, go ahead, please.
And again, we've been talking about reopening schools. There's a bill that was introduced in the last Congress and was reintroduced this spring, or this winter, I guess it was in late January, early February, as this Congress began, and they renamed it. So it was the Rebuild America Schools Act. It's now the Rebuild and Reopen America Schools Act. And what you need to know about this law, and the reason it's important, when you think about reopening schools, think about the importance of high quality air circulation and ventilation, and the need for maybe improved HVAC systems. Think about the additional equipment that might be needed, and some of it would be capital equipment to allow you to learn safely. And then think about some of us that may be teaching in schools with crumbling infrastructure or less than stellar auditoriums, et cetera. So these funds can help with that rebuild, and it's meant it's an infrastructure bill. So when you hear President Biden talk about infrastructure bills that will be coming out in the fall, or that will be discussed in the fall, this is going to be one of them. And so we want to make certain that folks are aware that this bill matters, that it's important for arts education, and that we are supportive of it, because we know that arts facilities are included in the bill. And so we're grateful for that. And we want to speak to what those needs might be. I mean, many of you might be performing working in situations that are less than stellar for your art form. And I'm seeing Don giggle. Thank you for that, Don. So this is an opportunity to speak to what some of those needs might be, and this act could help ameliorate some of those issues.
Yeah, I just want to support what Lynn was talking about. This may be an opportunity for you to reflect on the condition of your own facilities and tell a very, very personal story about how the condition of your black box or your proscenium theater or whatever kind of space is compromising you and your fellow students or teachers' ability to actually deliver the quality theater education experience that you think you should be able to do. So,
and some of that, Jim, right? I'm just thinking back to times when I would walk theater spaces in Arizona when I was at the Department of Ed down there, and you know, sometimes it's like basic safety, right? Like the fire curtain didn't work anymore. Like, holy cow, that's a huge issue, right? I mean, things. And I think sometimes when people think we're asking about auditorium upgrades or improvements, they think we're thinking about, you know, the fanciest thing that we've seen on Broadway. No, sometimes it's just about basic safety for students and teachers making use of that space. So lean into that if that's the situation you find yourself in.
Beyond the issues of the pandemic.
Right.
You know, those are also within that realm.
Absolutely.
All right, so the asks, what do we want? All of which we have in one way or another talked about. So in your toolkit, you will find two sheets. One is a kind of a presentation sheet. If you were in person, you might be holding that up and going down it with a pen or a pencil. In this case, you'll be going down it with your eyes and presenting it as a sort of a shorthand version of what we are asking. So appropriation, support access to theater education by appropriating $1.6 billion to fully fund Title IV Part A. I would like to see theater do a much, much better job of coordinating requests for Title IV Part A money for professional development, for infrastructure. There is money here we have not, frankly, taken advantage of it as well as we should have in the past couple of years. I think we can. Support access to theater education for the most disadvantaged students by fully funding Title I Part A programs for both school-wide and targeted. Let me just say this, that under the pandemic, some of the economic fallout is most likely to fall on high poverty districts with shrinking tax bases. And they are the schools who will most likely have to make very, very, very difficult choices regarding who gets what access to what, including arts education. Title I Part A programs for disadvantaged students, extremely important. Support professional development for theater educators by appropriating $2.295 million, or rather billion, for Title II and for Part A, and $35 million for Title IV Part F. I don't need to tell the educators and frankly the students, because you need them to be as good as they can be, how important it is to have ongoing professional development. And now, because when we go back into in-person environment, the fact is hybrid will never go away. New, innovative professional development that offers a kind of a reset update to what we really need to call the new normal of education is necessary. We can't go back to the old way. There's a new normal. So that money is also very important. And support requests. We just talked about this. Congress should pass the Rebuild and Reopen America Schools Act in time for 2022 implementation. 2, the National Assessment Governing Board should immediately reinstate the previously scheduled arts, foreign language, geography, and economics assessment in the NAEP calendar. And Congress should appropriate additional funds to the National Center for Educational Statistics for NAEP assessments in the arts, foreign languages, geography, and economics during the FY 2022 budgeting process. Lynn, could you address this for a moment?
Sure. So for those of you who have heard about the Nation's Report Card, which is a national assessment process, that's what the NAEP is. And while normally we talk about the Nation's Report Card and think about results in reading or math or sometimes science and technology, there is an arts NAEP assessment as well. Traditionally, it's been given out about once every decade. Unfortunately, it's been given out most recently only for 8th grade, only for responding in music, and only for creating and responding in visual arts. What happened is with the new governing board coming into position and looking at costs and priorities, a year and a half ago, they stripped the arts out of the timeline to have it be assessed, have the arts be assessed this decade. And so we need to get it back on the timeline, and not only put back on the timeline, wouldn't it be great if it was funded appropriately so that we could have assessments in dance, theater, music, visual arts, media arts, and have assessments in elementary, middle, and high school, and have assessments that look at creating, responding, and performing in all of the art forms. And hence the 2-part request here for the NAEP.
And these assessments are so important because they offer a snapshot of what the individual, what does arts learning look like? What does theater learning look like? And in turn, that can help shape curriculum at the state and district level. It is extremely important that this gets restored. Last, Congress should urge the Federal Communications Commission to restore wireless microphone users access to a reliable geolocation database and preserve education, nonprofit, performing arts, and media organizations' financial investment in technical equipment. This is an ongoing issue of concern that we have been monitoring and working at for several years. I'm not going to go into the detail of the, excuse me, spectrum auction issues, auctions that have occurred over the last several years that kicked folks out of the existing spectrum area and required them to buy new equipment, except to say that if you are using really old equipment, you may yet encounter a moment in which somebody is talking to their grandma on your wireless microphone headphone. We need that geolocation database that allows you to sign in to make sure that you're operating in a spectrum space that is not being used by somebody else, including a private commercial enterprise. So at that, we talked about the leaving behind documents. All of these are in your toolkit. These are the things that you need to leave behind with your legislator or their staff member. That request two-pager that offers a lot more detail on the things we just covered. A quick facts about theater education sheet. Some of these are drawn right out of that kiosk 31 facts that are going up every day right now as part of Theater in Our Schools month. They are research-based, they tell the truth. The Theater in Our Schools flyer, beautiful flyer, so important. Let's celebrate students and TIAS this month. The EDTA mission and goals sheet. Guess what? A lot of legislators have no idea who the Theater Education Association is. You want to tell them, share the mission and goals, who we are. Theater education for all students. It's a civil rights issue as far as I'm concerned. They need to hear it. The Arts Are Education Informational two-pager. It lays out those fundamental things that I talked about at the outset. It talks about the talking points about which we can solve this, and it also lists the 3 actionables, which is sign the pledge, pass the resolution, and write your state legislators. It is a grassroots campaign, national in scope. So at that, on those meetings, do your homework, get ready, and be prepared to adapt. You may only get 10 minutes on your meeting. You could be on a Zoom and suddenly the staffer or the legislator will say, I got to go to the floor. There's a vote that I have to go to. Be ready. Always get the ask in. How many visits that were really great? And you walk out of the office and you realize, I forgot to ask them exactly what I wanted for. I don't care if it's the federal level, state level, or a meeting with a superintendent. Again, leave the documents behind. And remember, consider yourself the expert in the room. You know what you're talking about regarding theater education. And part of that will be because that's who you are. And you have this great story to tell. Tell that personal story. It's powerful along with the data. And don't forget to follow up with a thank you email. Follow up. You're the expert. Make yourself available because you matter. All right, one more thing. You've been very patient, and then we'll just open up the floor for questions. Len, do you want to talk about this for a second? It's kind of a cool extra.
Sure. I'm thrilled to say that we're planning an arts education, social emotional learning congressional briefing. My colleagues at NAFME are pulling this together with staff from Senator John Tester's office. Senator Tester hails from the state of Montana, and his first job out of college was as a music educator prior to going back to working the land on his parents' farm that he took over and then running to become senator for the state of Montana. So his office often does things that are music and arts friendly and arts education friendly. And so we're really thrilled to have his office help support us with a congressional briefing looking at social emotional learning and arts education. We have joining us for that briefing and leading it, Bob Morrison will serve as moderator, hailing from the state of New Jersey for all the New Jerseyites on the call. Dr. Scott Edgar will be on. He's a professor in Illinois, and he is now the director for the Center of Arts Education and Social Emotional Learning, a brand new national center focused on this. We'll also have experts from CASEL, which is the national set of experts on social emotional learning, joining us, talking about the intersection between SEL and arts learning. And then we'll have a couple of folks doing this work at the local level. Dr. Yora Lashley, who works at UW in Wisconsin at Madison Schools of Education, but also does community arts work as well. So we'll be talking about it as an collaborator with schools. And then Darlene Machahon, who is a pre-K, 6th grade elementary music educator from Orange County, California. So many states involved, many different roles involved, and an opportunity to share out the power of what you all do in your classroom each and every day to support the social and emotional well-being of your students.
So Then we'll be able to provide a link to this at a later date, right?
Yes, we're working with our colleagues at the NAM Foundation. They will be setting this up as a Zoom webinar, and then it'll also be streamed live. So we'll make certain that you guys have access to those links when they come out.
I'll make sure everybody gets it. All right, so thank you for your patience and your goodwill. And I'm going to stop sharing now and open up the floor for questions. You can use the raise hand feature, or you can, there are not that many of us, you're welcome to just unmute. Who has a question? I haven't looked in the chat. If there are questions in there, I will look now. Don't see any questions there. Who has a question? Somebody must have one question. Andrea Roney.
Mute and get rid of the chat. I'm unmuting. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Quick question. For this March 24th meeting you just talked about, would it be appropriate to invite like one of my school board members or something to join us for that? Or an administrator?
Certainly.
Okay,
Yeah, sure.
okay,
Absolutely.
all right. Thanks.
Well, we've still got some students here. Any of you folks have a question? Juliet?
Yeah, Juliet. Can we have your emails one more time? I just missed them.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we'll put the emails in the chat.
Thank you.
You bet. I'm going to put mine in. Lennox put hers in. I will put mine in.
And thanks, Zach, for speaking to the fact that email seems to be a more efficient way and effective way to reach staffers right now. I think you're right.
I was trying to call them, and a lot of them it's going right to voicemail. So I emailed them all on Saturday, and I think as of today I've already gotten 6 replies.
Awesome.
6 out of 14.
That's great. It's a great start.
Well, we've got some veterans on here. Zach, you're a veteran. You know in the Hill. Helen, Marianne, I know you've had your time on the Hill. Any comments? Any other advice that you would like to add here today, or questions?
I'm excited, obviously, for this new journey. It's going to be something different than what a lot of us have done before. So I'm glad that I have so many kids that are willing to still do it, even though, a lot of them are sitting on the screen all day for school. So to see all these kids here, even the ones not from my state, it's great to see.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I have 2 Iowans here, and I'm really happy they've joined us, 2 students. And I think it's just a matter of us, when we meet, putting on our hats and really thinking about this different environment and how much different that will be. The last time I took a student to the Hill, the legislator ran back because she was so afraid she wasn't going to see the student. She didn't really care about what I had to say, but she did want to see the student. So I think those are really important things. The more students we have, the better, because it is your voice. You are the future, the one that's going to directly impact. And I think that's the thing we need to keep in mind.
Before I forget, I want to make a plug for tomorrow's and Wednesday's session. Woohoo, more Zoom. But tomorrow is a session led by the International Thespian Officers. I see Maura here. Hi, Maura. And Lena Dougherty, one of our other ITO, who will lead a session and talk about student advocacy. And it's going to be great because they've created a great presentation. So, hey, come back. You don't want to miss it. It's a lot more interesting than listening to me. That's for sure. So that's my plug. And then on Wednesday, or rather, on Thursday, we have the veteran ALN members, Advocacy Leadership Network, Helen Durnall-Bennon, who's on here, and Mr. Michael Dane, and also Sharon Chadwick from Nevada, who will share and talk about their experiences on doing Capitol Hill visits, because they're all different. No visit is ever quite the same. So that's really valuable. And Zach, you know that too. All right, onward. Other questions, thoughts? I saw other people unmuted briefly. No one?
I have another question.
Okay, Julia.
Can we invite people who aren't here today for tomorrow?
Oh man, Juliet, you can invite anyone you want, your grandma, your next door neighbor, the guy who walks with your dog, whatever. Yeah, sure. No, we are stronger together. Let me just say one thing, because some people, there is the old sort of trope about how intimidating it is to be an advocate. I have never met anybody who, once they went through a visit with a legislator, didn't come out on the other side and go, oh yeah, they put their pants or their skirt on just like the rest of us. And by the way, they work for you. So advocacy is not nearly as challenging as you think it might be. So my point is that invite people in who think it's not for them. It is for them. It's for everybody. It's for all of us.
The other thing I would say that I didn't say, and I think you alluded to it, but so much of what you're doing is building a relationship with these people, and you will come back to the same relationship again when the world is better next year and we actually see each other in DC. You'll come back to these same relationships that you're building now. So much of it is that. So it is about being diplomatic and pleasant and personable and still getting your point across. That's how you're going to build those relationships that you'll need.
And the tools, the skills that you learn in this process, I talk about that in those 5 steps of success, are scalable. The fundamentals of advocacy, whether with at the federal level or the state level, at the local level, the building level, the fundamentals are the same. And I think, Helen just really cited as you're building relationships, don't ever burn your bridges, and always take the high road. There are some real fundamental things that will serve you well throughout your advocacy career at whatever level. Mr. Dane.
We may be living in a very partisan country right now, but the arts are largely a nonpartisan issue. There are lots of people in both parties who think that what we do in the arts, what happens in the theater, what happens in music, that they're really significant. There's sometimes disagreements about funding, but overall, I usually get to walk into a meeting and say, hi, I'm the breath of fresh air that you're going to see today. We're not going to fight about, any number of controversial, divisive issues. We're just going to talk about things that bring a lot of joy and a lot of growth to a lot of people. And the flip side of that is, don't allow your sessions to turn into a partisan conversation. The only thing that you're there to talk about are the arts right now, where again, nobody's going to disagree that they're important. They might disagree a little bit about the funding, but if you bring up issues that are controversial in a session where you're supposed to be talking about the arts, they may tune out that complete message also. So that's probably a rule to go by.
Thank you, Michael. So true. You're the good news, and legislators generally love students. They love having their picture taken with them. They love talking to them. I mean, it's kind of interesting. We'll see what kind of virtual pictures you can take. That's an interesting challenge. Maybe it can be done. Other thoughts? Other questions?
If you're a student and you have something upcoming, if you have a spring show that's upcoming that you can invite the legislator to, please do that. They love to be included in what you're doing. And if they show, make sure that you acknowledge them. But it's a great way to keep that relationship going and give them a reason for you to come back to them.
Great idea. Thank you, Mary. And, offer them a walk-on. You never know. It might take.
Hi, my name's Stephanie. I'm new to this group. This is my first meeting. I happened to trip upon you guys. You sent an email, and I was very excited to see it because I'm the board president in my local district, and we're going through some really bad funding issues with the S2 cuts. And unfortunately, the first place that everybody seems to look is the arts, and that's really sad, and it's frustrating. But one of the things that I'm also a mom who has adopted a special needs child, and I have a grandson who is autistic. And the one thing that I find that is so inclusive in their days at school is when they get to enjoy music class together with integrated in a setting, when they have an arts program where it kind of evens out the level. It really brings them all together as a community. It makes them feel a part of something. So I guess my question here is I know you were talking about reaching out to those members that sit on these different committees that are, I guess, really starting out making these decisions on whether or not they're going to be moving these items forward to a vote. But is there really any harm if you have relationships with other congressmen in your district to reach out to them and say, I know that these things are sitting in these committees, but I want you to realize how important it is educationally, how important it is in maintaining that community feeling that, you know, everybody kind of comes out when the plays go on in high school. Yeah, everybody it really brings everybody together as a community. And when you start seeing these programs starting to disappear or the funding starting to disappear, and you see less and less of plays happening on the elementary level or on the high school level or in the middle school level, just how that kind of starts to tear down your community and their ability, where I know all of these, you know, sciences and maths and how important they are, but they really don't realize how important socially and emotionally the arts are to our children, not just, you know, not just our special needs children, but our other children, but just how it really kind of I don't know other words, but levels the playing field in the sense that everybody can participate and everybody enjoys it. You know, I see my son with music. He's in his own world when it's happening. And I just find that sometimes when we don't have enough money to support some of these programs and we go out and we put clubs together that are competitive in nature, that some of the children that may not be as good as other children are out to actually compete, they miss out. So I guess I just didn't know if anybody had anything. I'm like I said, I'm new to this. So anything you can offer, I would really love to hear, you know, some successes that have happened or that I could bring with me in engaging some of these other people within our district to really start getting behind this. And then once it gets to the state level, as you said, and that's a whole nother nightmare. How do you ensure that the funds are truly being used for, and they're not kind of flipping it around? Because like you said, they're so broad and open in what you can. So is there any way that we can guarantee once these arts funds are actually turned over to the state in the different Title IVs or what have you, that it remains art focused and art based and they can't use it someplace else?
Stephanie, first let me say how grateful I am that you are here, that we are all grateful that you are here. Speaking as a school board person and as a parent, you speak for all of us, I think. And there is no really easy answer, but you said a couple of key things. And to me, one of the most important things that you said, the word was community, because it is one thing for one individual to walk into a school board meeting and try to make the case for a program, a class, a staff person. But it's something else to have a community behind that person. So what I often say is, the question I ask is, would your community allow your theater program to go away? So you need to really put forth and reach out.
They
to them.
wouldn't, and they've been fighting, but I think what happens is everybody kind of does their thing. I'm not sure it's as organized as maybe it should be. And I've already, as I've been listening to you guys on it, started to reaching out to some of our, teachers and drama advisors and other board members that are really engaged in our arts community to say, I'm going to be forwarding you some information. I think we really need to focus and get in on this because it's so important. But like I said, it's, I'm looking, just off the top of my head, I can think of Bob Menendez, Frank Pallone, Bill Preskrell, and Bonnie Watson Coleman that actually sit on the committees that you've been talking about. But they're, other than Bob Menendez and Frank Pallone, they're not really in our area per se.
So, Stephanie, if I could, you're in New Jersey, is that correct?
Yeah, we're in New Jersey, yeah.
I think you should have a one-on-one conversation with Zach Bates.
Okay.
Stephanie, I'll put my email in the chat for you.
Oh, great, okay.
Anybody else want to comment on Stephanie's comments? Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. And you please reach out to me as well. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about whether we can get your district board to perhaps pass the Arts Our Education resolution. We should talk about that.
Yeah, yes, I think we could absolutely get that done.
Please reach out to me directly and let's plot a strategy to make that happen.
Okay, great, thank
Stephanie,
you.
Stephanie, what school are you from? Just
Brick,
okay. Oh, you're with Miss O'Brien.
yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right, so this has been a great conversation, and we are nearly at time. And I want to just give a final opportunity. Lynn, do you have any final comments that you would like to add?
No, just thank you all for the advocacy work that you've done in the past and that you're going to be doing this month on behalf of theater education and arts education. You're going to make a difference. And Helen, as you said so beautifully, the stories that you'll all share as teachers and particularly as students have a huge impact on Capitol Hill with the staffers and the members of Congress with whom you meet. So thank you again for doing it. And as Zach said, thank you for trying it out in this new environment as we all meet with members of Capitol Hill virtually.
All right. So thank you all. In the next day or two, start making your appointments. And I am here to help you, as are other members of the EDTA team. And see you on the hills of Capitol Hill in a Zoom room. So good luck to you all. And hey, sign in tomorrow. ITO, yay. I will see you.
Thank you, Jim.
See you, Jim.
Thank you. Signing out.
Thank you,
now.
Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.